said because there's a delay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 27 of the Capitalist Corner. I'm your host, Mark Pellegrino. Yes, I'm here. I was supposed to be filming, but there's bad weather over in Georgia, so here I am being the host of the Capitalist Corner, also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my esteemed co-host and co-chairman of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, who is also the host of his own show, The Rational Egoist, which you should watch if you want to get smarter. And raising the general IQ of the world right now upon his shoulders is our special guest, James Valliant. What's up, my friend? We love you.
Well, I love you guys too. Thank you. You're always so kind to me.
No. We're not kind. We're just giving you the props you justly deserve.
No. I think one of us is a little bit more kind to you. If
right,
you know what I'm saying. Judging by the debate that we had, I'd say somebody is a little bit kinder.
We don't have to rehash old things. But look, speaking of fangirling,
can I tell you something first?
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to tell everyone, listen, I got a great episode of The Rational Egoist out right now. I interviewed historian and economic historian Philip Magnus on Marxism. It's great. He helps put the beat down on Marxism. And shout out to my boy Mark Pellegrino. I'm rocking his shirt today. Reality check.
Go, baby. Go. Reason. Self-interest and capitalism will take over the world, folks.
And Rock Chartrand says hola, so he's here. Perfect timing.
Okay. Here's what I want to do. I'm hearkening back because I'm fangirling over James Valliant here, but I also got a fangirl over Rock. Rock the Rock. This is now his nickname for me. He's the Rock. He is okay. If commies are vampires, he is Van Helsing. Okay, and I'm not talking about the Laurence Olivier Van Helsing. We're talking about Hugh Jackman with rocking Kate Beckinsale on his shoulder. This is the guy that we need on the front lines, attacking these vampirous, social and soul-sucking folks we call communists.
Good thing you didn't call him Buffy.
Yeah. No. This guy is the real deal. So the head of the, I guess it's the Midwestern chapter of the American Communist Party, did a tweet the other day, which I retweeted and responded to because I wanted people to see how crazy the communists are. But I just want everyone to listen to a well-reasoned beatdown. So here's the communist speaking. The petty bourgeois has a choice of siding with either fascism or communism. Their middle-class prejudices and individualism make them susceptible to reaction, but their opposition to big banks and corporations make them potentially revolutionary. Which way, Western small business owner? All right, so here's what The Rock says, and I mean, I don't want to play it up anymore, but I don't think I could do it a disservice by playing it up. But here it is. This Marxist drivel is a textbook case of ideological sleight of hand, presenting a false choice between two tyrannies and pretending it's a profound insight. First, the idea that the petty bourgeois must choose between fascism and communism is a trap. It's like asking if you'd prefer to be devoured by a lion or a bear. Either way, you're dead. Your property is seized and your rights are vaporized. Both ideologies are collectivist nightmares that crush the very class they claim to mobilize. Fascism enslaves the individual to the nation state, communism to the proletariat. The small business owner becomes nothing more than a tool, or more often a target, for whichever gang takes power. Second, this nonsense about middle-class prejudices and individualism reveals everything. The crime, in Marxist terms, isn't exploitation, it's independence. These people hate the middle class, not because it's oppressive, but because it refuses to bow. It's too productive to beg, too self-sufficient to be herded, and too free-thinking to submit. And that supposed opposition to big banks and corporations, that's not revolutionary, it's entrepreneurial. The small business owner doesn't want to abolish wealth, he wants to level the playing field, not a gulag. He opposes cronyism, not capitalism. So which way, Western small business owner? The answer isn't left or right totalitarianism, it's upward. toward true capitalism, individual rights, and limited government, towards a society where success isn't punished, property isn't collectivized, and the state exists only to protect your freedom, not repurpose it for the people. Marxism sees you as a temporary tool, a class to be manipulated until it's purged. Capitalism sees you as a person with rights, ambition, and the power to rise. Choose accordingly. I have chills. I have tears almost coming up to my eyes. I want The Rock to be president, to be honest with you, because this formulation of capitalism versus the false dichotomy that communism places us in is so beautiful. I mean, did you guys get the tinglies? I got the tinglies.
Listen, I've been following Rock, and I recommend everybody follow him. He also wrote a great piece this morning that he posted about who the evil one is between Satan and God in the story. It's very good. And when somebody accused me, said I'm a libertarian because I have Ayn Rand in my bio, Rock came to the defense with an awesome series of quotes from Rand. So give Rock a follow. He's great. I think he might be Canadian though, Mark. So I don't know if he's
hey, I got to tell
ready
you,
to be president.
Isn't Peikoff Canadian?
Yeah, we're not getting him for president.
Oh, so yeah, that's right. He can't be president. So that's what you're saying. But still, what I'm saying is the best minds seem to be coming out of Canada. I wish they were the 51st state sometimes because of guys like this who articulate the.
You're going to open up a whole new can of worms with that.
I won't do that. I won't do that. Anyway, if you're not following Rock right now, you got to follow the guy. He's completely rational. A great. He is an island in the storm, folks. You can go to him and you can rest assured you're going to find a light of reason that will open up the darkness for you. Listen, we're going to talk about free speech a little bit today, and that's one of the reasons we have the great Mr. Valliant on here to talk about free speech, because it is a hot topic, and it seems like both sides, the left and the right, are enemies of free speech. They seem to want to control. They seem to want to control the media and social media with respect to whatever messaging they feel opposes their tribe. But and so we hear a lot of it now going on the right. We certainly heard it coming from the left, and they actually did control speech at one point when people with respect to vaccines and controversy over that. So Jim, you're gonna clear up this speech thing for us. Talk to us a little bit about what free speech is and how we should look at it going forward.
Well, the real irony here is that both sides in their advocacy of outright censorship are claiming the mantle of free speech. In the name of free speech, we're going to use antitrust laws to go after the big social media platforms. That's coming now, mind you, this defense of antitrust laws to go after free speech is coming from the right. From the right, they're using economic regulations to impose censorship. And from the left, of course, well, money isn't speech. We all went to hell in a handbasket the minute the Supreme Court said that spending your money on political causes is part of free speech. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that there is no separation between property rights and civil rights, and that property rights are the only way to implement civil rights. And when you go after property rights, like both sides are doing right now, when you ignore economic liberties, as both sides are doing right now, that imposes, in fact, actual censorship. Only the government can censor. Censorship only involves force. And so when you invoke the force of government, that is what censorship is. It isn't the fact that you guys won't have someone, you'll have me on, but you won't have some communist dickhead on, is not censorship. Censorship does not mean that you're owed a platform, someone else's microphone, can go into their living room and start yelling at them. Property rights is the only way to implement free speech. Civil rights and economic rights are a unity and cannot be understood apart from one another.
Amen to that. I mean, we don't hear enough of that kind of discussion in the public forum because the establishments are trying to each force their will on everybody else. Let me ask you a question. I heard, they had some student protests the other day. Of course, these guys are engaging in illegal activities, like they're occupying buildings and they're preventing people from going to class and they're becoming violent. But what do you think about that guy that, they're advertising all over Fox News, the guy who said, dead police is an act for the resistance. So he was essentially inciting people to kill cops.
Yeah, he's a murderous, dictatorial thug. This guy's politics, he refutes any sense of liberalism to his politics. We would all be in gulags if we disagreed with him, should that asshole ever get power. There's no question about it. Now, advocacy, if I'm merely advocating, it's an interesting distinction I would draw. If I'm in a group of people and there are cops coming in to arrest us, and I say, kill that cop over there, and everyone starts ganging up on that cop, I've engaged in a part of my speech is part of this criminal activity. Criminal activity includes the talking that gets you there, like a conspiracy or solicitation or something like that, or an incitement to immediate and specific violence. But if I were to write an essay and publish it in a journal and say, I think it's okay to kill cops under certain circumstances, I would say that that's free speech, however abhorrent and vile and disgusting that is. Now, fortunately, I do think most Americans haven't reached a point of such corruption that most Americans wouldn't immediately see that a mere advocacy of cop killing in general would disqualify him as a thinker as such and outside of the American, Americanism. Let me put it that way. On the other hand, I would make a firm distinction between mere abstract advocacy, which I think is protected by the First Amendment and free speech, and an actual incitement. So if this guy's running, and this was the film I saw, this guy's out there actually demonstrating and trespassing and threatening. And if he makes that kind of comment when the cops are coming in, that is actionable. That's part of a specific threat of violence against a specific person that can be imminently acted upon. That's the kind of threat that is not free speech. So when your speech becomes an actual part of a violation of someone's rights, that's when it can be regulated. But this is true of all of our rights. My freedom of religion, for example, Aztec practice of human sacrifice. You say, well, we have freedom of religious practice. Why can't I kill children in my religious practice like the Aztecs did? Well, it violates another individual's rights. And if we all equally, as the framers of our Constitution understood, if we all equally have this same right, then obviously the exercise of my religion or my free speech rights extends only so far as to the moment when I actually start violating someone else's equal right to do the same.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make. Oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, and then I'll ask my question.
Well, it is a very important distinction to make, because now people are finding they're finding that speech that makes them uncomfortable, or they find reprehensible, or that is in fact morally reprehensible. It just on its face is calling for intifada, worldwide intifada, calling from the river to the sea for the genocide of the Israeli people, is morally reprehensible, but still protected speech. Now blocking campuses, preventing Jewish students from going to classes, clogging the streets to get this message out. No, those are violating the rights of other people and trespassing upon them, and that's actionable. But fortunately, folks, I say fortunately because even though this rule, this right protects reprehensible characters, in a sense, it protects you and I, because you and I could run afoul of the establishment. And even though we're speaking in completely rational terms, we could run afoul and be persecuted by the government. And the government is prohibited from doing that to us by the First Amendment. Go ahead, Michael.
Jim, when you talk about immediate incitement, I think these two legal terms are relevant. And if they are, just like you to explain them. If they're not, then just dismiss me out of hand, then we can move on. But reasonable foreseeableness and proximate cause seem to me like those terms, those concepts are extremely relevant when we get into what you're talking about.
Yes, they're technical legal terms that, you get all kinds of education about if you go to law school in the United States. So I tried, in a general discussion, I try to avoid them, but you're absolutely right. Proximate cause. We ask, but for this, would that have happened? And in proximate cause, we stretch out just a little bit more to say, this guy was his action, the natural and probable consequences of which led to this activity. If I'm talking to an angry mob and I see a cop there and I say, let's kill that cop, and a bunch of people start moving toward that cop, you can see it was my speech that stimulated the act. Now, if it's not immediate in its potential execution. If I'm just theoretically, talking about, well, we should overthrow the government, or, that obviously is disconnected from any specific act of violence. So it has to be specific, it has to be credible, it has to be immediate, and it has to be, as you point out, the proximate cause. It has to be an instrumental part of the causation of whatever is going to happen that does violate rights. And so, for example, it's like the examples I gave you before. If I walk up to you and I say, Michael, this Mark Pellegrino guy, he's really a jerk. I'll pay you $1,000 to kill him. Are my words protected speech? No, they're part of a solicitation to commit murder. If we get together, we conspire. Okay, next Saturday night, let's get together and go stake out his house and break into his window. Okay, that's not protected speech. That's a conspiracy to commit murder. So when words become part of a rights-violating crime, then and only then does my freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to peaceably assemble. But even a peaceful assembly can be a trespass. So even the right of peaceable assembly has to yield to property rights, or indeed, rather than say yield, let's say be consistent with the entire package of my rights. Rights are a single unity. The framers knew this. In the Declaration of Independence, they said that government exists for one purpose, to protect rights, and that all men equally possess the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's the whole function of government. When it becomes violative of those rights, you have a right to overthrow, change that government. That's embodied in our Constitution. You can see the right to life, liberty, and property expressed as a value in the 5th and 14th Amendments, and so forth. The whole idea is rights have to be understood in terms of this overarching philosophy of rights that the framers had. Absent that, once you drop that, what they called natural law jurisprudence once upon a time in Supreme Court decisions, once you step away from natural law jurisprudence, you have completely chucked in the meaning of each and every one of those rights, because all of them have to be seen in light of the other. Basic legal interpretation of a document would say you have to give meaning to each and every phrase in the legal document. None of them can be ignored. Each of them must be given meaning, and each in light of all the others. And so when you start saying that rights are in conflict, like our Supreme Court does, this right is in tension with that right, or your rights are in tension with someone else's rights, or these different levels of scrutiny. Economic liberties have a lower level of scrutiny. Civil liberties like free speech and freedom of religion have this strict scrutiny. All of that Supreme Court invention, they pulled it out of there and invented it from whole cloth, completely destroying the integrated vision of the Founding Fathers.
I just
Jim,
want to say,
I gotta say something here real quick. So not only if you offer somebody $1,000 to kill Mark, are you conspiring? You're also being incredibly cheap. I mean, let's $1,000 for a hit.
I wanted to I wanted to piggyback off of that and say that should anybody be conspiring to do that and break into my house, you leave on my terms, not on yours. Hey, so Jim, with respect to this, like, proximate cause stuff, January 6th, Bonnie Bertrand talks about that. Does this fall under that rubric, January 6th?
January 6th was criminal trespass. It was an act of insurrection, not much of an insurrection, frankly. They didn't obviously have much of a chance of seizing control of the government, but it was clearly, whatever Trump's followers think, it was an act of insurrection. It was a criminal act.
But was Trump's what Trump did beforehand? Could that be considered incitement, and could that be considered a criminal trespass or an accompaniment to criminal?
I'm not sure. If he says, "Look, the election was stolen from me. Please gather," that is not yet a statement. Go violate law. But if he's asking for an illegal demonstration, then he's no better than these Hamas protesters. Let's get together and, cause hell. Let's break windows. Let's trespass. Let's break into the Capitol building. If that was his intention, and that's what it would turn on. Unfortunately, Trump will never be legally tested on this. So, but surely some of the things he said afterwards, all rules can be suspended, even the Constitution, that kind of thing, which he said, a bit afterwards. But still, that confesses a kind of motive on his part that he didn't really give a crap about the issue of rights. Things that Trump has said lately, just lately. seem to be confessions. I don't know what the Constitution says. What the hell does I'm not a constitutional law professor. How should I know? Well, dude, you took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend this thing. If you don't have a clue what it means, if you don't have opinion on the basics of that thing called the Constitution, which is your boss, then you are a fraud. In the twice you took this presidential oath to this Constitution thingy that you have no clue what it is. And that's in effect what he's saying. I don't know what the Constitution means. I don't know what the Constitution says. You need to be an expert. Are you violating the Constitution? I don't know. Do you need to obey due process? I don't know. And then it's part of that interview where he said, I won't run for a third term. Probably, but it's legal experts. They tell me. Well, dude, you're the president. You need to have your own independent view of what the Constitution is, because you're one of the three independent branches of this government, and you just took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend that Constitution thingy.
This is a guy who thinks the Declaration of Independence was a document of love. I just want you to throw that out to the union.
So
That's
Jim,
the way it was, but not in the sense of
it was a love of life, is what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Jim,
But it was also
mentioned it was a declaration of war. Ashley shrugs, says, "Cool shirt, Michael." Thank you, Ashley. I believe that you may have designed it. I'm not sure, but Jim, you mentioned natural law jurisprudence, right? The distinction between natural law and positive law is natural law is to be discovered, whereas positive law is to be created, right? So I want you to it reminds me of the distinction between malum in se and malum prohibita. And I want you to kind of tie those concepts in to your principle of free speech and to Ayn Rand's principle that the initiation of force is the thing to be defended against by government. If I included too much, let me know, but I don't think I did.
Well, no. See, the Constitution itself relies upon an overarching theory of rights. I mean, consider, for example, phrases like due process of law or privileges and immunities. What the hell do those concepts mean? They're making reference to a broader philosophy of rights, the philosophy of rights that you'll read in the Declaration or implicitly in several passages of the Constitution. Consider the Ninth Amendment. It says there's all these unenumerated rights we have. The framers were clearly relying on a broader theory of natural rights. And you better be hip to that, or you'll never understand any of these things. Your normal positivist, legal realist who makes law, he will say, no. These things have to be understood. You have to strip them out of context and judge them each on their own. And if they come into conflict with each other, see, that contradicts the basic rule of legal interpretation anyway. You have to read each of the phrases of a legal document in light of the others, giving each of them significance, but in light of what the others say. So if the 14th Amendment says equal protection, I've got to make that consistent with everything else. It can't stand out separate apart from itself. And that's what these legal realists, positivists do. They strip out little technical parts of it and they say, well, let's analyze freedom of speech. Well, clearly freedom of speech is in conflict with property rights, right? Well, clearly the Establishment Clause on religion is in conflict with the Free Exercise Clause. Well, that is actually an artifact of the fact that they want to keep public education and things like that. And if it wasn't, public education wasn't their axiom walking in the door, they could clearly see that any involvement of government in education is a violation of the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause if they're properly understood as an integrated single whole, which is the duty of the Supreme Court, and any constitutional analyst worth his salt has to, or he's actually being dishonest and ripping to shreds the original intention and meaning of the Constitution. Each of them has to be integrated into a consistent, unified whole, or your entire approach is corrupt and itself a violation of the plain meaning and original intent of the Constitution.
Well,
thanks, Jim.
Why are so many people disintegrated?
Now that comes down to philosophy. Pragmatism corrupted, particularly pragmatism corrupted the American mind and the American judicial mind. And so we're not wedded to these old-fashioned principles of, individual rights or natural law, the things the founding fathers talked about. We have to judge each case on its own merits. We can't be wedded inflexibly to these broad principles. And so given that pragmatist corruption that has happened in law schools across America for the last 140 years, it is a natural, this disintegration is a natural upshot. Each little thing can't be part of an integrated, consistent package of principles, uniting principles that integrate everything. No, no, no. Each one has to be judged on its merits. What will be the effect of this judged out of context? What will be the practical effect of that judged out of context? And of course, they really don't consider the practical effect of making a hash out of the entire document, do they?
Apparently they don't.
But I blame philosophy for this mental disintegration. Ultimately, it goes back to men like Kant and Hegel, in my view, who directly gave rise to the American philosophy of pragmatism of William James and John Dewey. And they corrupted the judicial mind, and frankly, many American minds, to be anti-principle, anti-integration on principle.
Guys, I think this deserves a like button press right now. I mean, you're getting gold at this moment. They're
doing good. They're doing good. Almost everybody watching is hit like. If you haven't, hit it now.
Yeah, if you haven't hit it now, because you're learning about the Constitution, you're learning about rights, and you can't get this in any establishment, educational institution. So, and you're getting it here for free. So,
I'd raise my hand in law school, say the law professor in criminal procedure would ask, well, who believes that this should be the case? And to me, it was obvious that should be the case. And so I'd raise my hand. I'd be the only one in class, the only one of 30 students there raising his hand. And he would just look at me and say, apart from that crazy libertarian up there. Now, I'm obviously not a libertarian, I'm an objectivist, but still, that's how out of it I am. It shows you how far we've come just in ordinary law school classes when someone stands up and says, no. What about what Madison and Jefferson actually meant? What about those original natural law justices in the Supreme Court who had some clue what the Privileges and Immunities Clause meant, for example? No, that's not even on the menu today of thought. I'm just some kook, you see.
Well, actually, folks, there is, we're looking at two parties today, the Democrats and the Republicans, that are steeped in pragmatism. And we're looking at the whole political field right now in the world is steeped in pragmatism. They're not an integrated whole, but there is a party out there, James, that is an integrated whole. It's called the American Capitalist Party. And if you go to AmericanCapitalistParty.org, read for yourself where principles are an integrated whole, where we understand this concept, this philosophical concept, and how it has to be enforced. I mean, this is great to me. Michael, do you have any questions?
I do, but first I just want to say we have with us today the person who is the single hardest person to debate I have ever debated in my life. And I got to say, though, it is made harder when the moderator puts a foot on the scale. But I don't want to rehash. I don't want to rehash old things. But Jim, you actually, in the batch of stuff that you sent me, you actually make a very unique argument. I have to confess, though I read it, I did not have the time to analyze it the way that it would actually deserve for me to really give an opinion on it. But I did think it was extremely interesting, well-reasoned, and unique. And it had to do with the abolition of government education. And I would like for you to kind of make that case. Tell us about your theory.
Well, it actually emanated, too, from an argument we had when you were here in San Diego, where I was saying that secular philosophy is protected by the free exercise of religion clause. And the argument goes like this. And by implication, of course, all public involvement in government involvement in education is therefore a violation of both the establishment and free exercise clauses. Now, the way the First Amendment reads is as follows. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So let me just ask in the abstract, and I would ask this of religious people, non-religious people, could the United States government make atheism the established creed and use taxpayer money to print out propaganda for atheism? No. Well, clearly, I think most people would say, no, that would be a violation of the Establishment Clause. I think James Madison would agree that that would be a violation of the Establishment Clause. So let me back up and say, could they establish Marxism, existentialism? Could they establish objectivism even as the official creed of America? No, they could not. Even a secular creed could be an established religion. Now, whatever the Free Exercise Clause protects is simply the thereof. So whatever religion means in the Establishment Clause, it must mean in the Free Exercise Clause. Religion is used only once. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So whatever can't be established, let me just put it real clearly, whatever the government can't establish is what is exactly protected in its free exercise. So anytime the government engages in education, and this is where the Supreme Court will often say that the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause are in tension with each other. There's a tension, there's a contradiction. And so you see, they're all over the map, especially with public education cases. Can they support buses that send kids to Catholic schools? Can they subsidize the books in Catholic schools or Jewish schools? Because that creates a theoretical problem. On the one hand, we'd be using taxpayer money to support religious education. On the other hand, if we don't, aren't we then prejudicing the free exercise of religious people? Or if the school decides, in the very famous Scopes monkey case, and I have a very interesting take on it, you see, because of that, we're going to teach evolution. I believe in evolution. I would send my kids to a school that taught real science. On the other hand, the second they do that, they're stepping on someone's religious beliefs. Government has no right, no business to make one person pay for ideas that they disagree with for the sake of another person. So even secular education is a violation of the Establishment Clause. And you don't even have to go to biology. Obviously, history, civics, all that is on the face, literature, all that on the face of it is loaded with values that are going to be philosophical in nature. And that's all it has to be, is philosophical in nature, in my mind, to invoke the protection of the Establishment Clause. So it seems to, and I'm talking about math, I'm talking about basic stuff. If anyone could have a philosophical objection to the manner in which it's taught, for example, I disagree with the manner in which teaching a kid how to read, I mean, they've lost, phonics, it's making a little comeback, or the way they teach math, the new math. If I have a philosophical objection, which I do to those things, I'm afraid my right against having government established religion is being violated. So the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause must apply to secular philosophical ideas. Now, this is a radical notion, because what I'm suggesting is that the Free Exercise of Religion Clause actually sweeps across in a classical liberal way, saying that until and unless you violate someone else's equal right to do the same, you have the freedom to do anything in your best judgment, anything that your philosophy calls for, your philosophy of life, even if you're a subjectivist or a skeptic or a disintegrated whatever, your secular philosophy, you get to act on. And if you don't, then your rights are being violated. They can only do that if you are stepping on someone else's rights. For example, go back to my Aztec human sacrifice example. When Aztecs killed children, they're violating someone else's rights, right? If Sharia law says honor killing is okay, that is not free exercise of religion. That's violating someone else's equal right. Now, until and unless I get to act on my philosophy, in other words, the First Amendment says, whatever that is, until and unless I violate someone else's equal right to do the same. Now, that's the only way, and when you add the 14th Amendment, now the 14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War, said all persons must be treated equally. So obviously, whatever your philosophy is, secular, religious, they see that the Supreme Court understands that they limit it to sincere religious beliefs. Well, that's nonsense. In order for the Equal Protection Clause to be integrated with the First Amendment, the Establishment Free Exercise Clauses, what I'm saying really has to be the case. Otherwise, you're discriminating for or against atheists, agnostics, anyone else. And that is verboten under the Constitution as far as I can see.
So this is a great argument for private schooling. But I want to make the distinction between the American Capitalist Party and the Republicans, because the Republicans have had a couple of administrations that have been against the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education. They've wanted to ban it. Reagan and now Trump working to disband this federal agency. Now, They're doing it for they want to do it for different reasons. We've already seen why the American Capitalist Party would undo public education because of the non-integration of rights here. But what were the motivations of the Republicans? It's purely cultural, I think, right now with Trump, but Reagan even.
Well, even Reagan. Well, see, Reagan, it had just come into being, and Reagan was philosophically better on the issue of government power in general. So I think his motives were a little better. But part of the conservative motive back then was this new religious belief. The Supreme Court had said, well, in public schools, you can't start it with prayer. You can't teach religion. There can't be an official endorsement of religion. And they didn't like that. They didn't like the Supreme Court stepping onto the state's ability, and public schools are run by the state's ability to teach religion, start with a prayer. As you know, if you go to some places in this country, the state would officially have you learn religion and have religion crammed down your throat. So part of it was that. But I think there was a broader motive that Reagan had too. He didn't like the expansion of government and this new federal agency. He thought the federal government had no role in education. And he's right. In Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, there ain't no place you're going to see that federal government can support education. It is simply outside of the federal government's power to have anything to do with. Fast forward to today. Trump is busy playing a shell game, saying, no, we can preserve most of the subsidies and programs and hooks and controls. People are complaining about his cutting off funding. Say, let's go to higher education, cutting off his funding for Harvard. Well, guess what, folks? For decades, the federal government has been using subsidies to higher education in order to impose ideological controls. Trump is simply changing the configuration of ideological controls he's now imposing on Harvard University. That should point us all in the right direction. You see, both sides should realize that if your side is in power, your ideology is going to suffer if and insofar as the government has any role in education, whatever. This proves the leftists wanted civil rights and all their other stuff imposed in public education, and they'd use public subsidies as a hook to force them to do so. Certain colleges, like Hillsdale, opted out. So, no, we're not going to take a dime of your money, so we don't have to follow any of your conditions. We need to make that the principle, the constitutional principle. Government must be separated from education exactly for the same reason that we have state-church separation. Now, the other day, Trump said is the separation between church and state a good thing? I mean, the guy does not grasp the basics of the Constitution. And so he's questioning a basic pillar, separation of church and state. But when you see it that way, and my liberal friends, pay attention to what Trump's doing. If you don't like the ideological hooks he's putting on those subsidies, maybe it's time for you to check your premises and think about whether those ideological hooks are inherently corrupt, that nobody's ideology should be imposed on education. And that is precisely why we have one, separation of church and state. And the most immediate application, the most immediate violation that I can see right now is any government involvement in education. Now, it's broader than that, as I say, but clearly on the face of it, both the right and the left should be in a position to now see, hey, when my guy's not in power, we're going to get screwed because he's going to put his ideological hooks on those federal subsidies to education. Federal subsidies to education are a violation of the First Amendment, against the Establishment Clause, against the Free Exercise Clause, against the Free Speech Clause.
Well, not only that, Jim, but there's nothing in Article 1, Section 8 authorizing Congress to fund state education.
Yes.
So
over and above it all, how many ways does it violate the Constitution?
Yeah, but I'm going to throw you a softball.
But even the states, my friend, even California or Connecticut or New York cannot do this, because the 14th Amendment applies the Bill of Rights against the states.
Oh, you ruined that was my question. I was just going to say, I got a softball to throw you. Okay. And I was going to say, yes, but doesn't that only apply to the federal government, anticipating your 14th Amendment argument? And then here you come with it.
Well, yes, I'm a psychic and a genius, so you just have to cope with that.
It is true. And Jim, let me just say, you referenced our hours-long debate about the finer points of the Constitution in my hotel room in San Diego. And let me just tell you, my girlfriend loved it. It was
I was
great.
afraid she was going to be scared about it because I could get into it. You know what I mean? I was kind of mixing it up with you, and it usually scares the innocent bystander.
So, Mark, what about
It's
this?
it's too bad you didn't film that, because that we should be putting that on the American Capitalist website.
One thing I would say, at part of the 14th Amendment, yes, until the 14th Amendment, the Bill of Rights only applied against the federal government. That changes the way we have to look at things. I mean, James Madison assumed that you could have morality laws, maybe even public education on the state level, precisely because the First Amendment doesn't apply to the states yet. When the Civil War happens and they pass the 14th Amendment, they pass the Privileges and Immunities Clause, which was specifically intended to apply the Bill of Rights against each of the states. Now, right out of the chute, the Supreme Court said no. They gutted the 14th Amendment. In the slaughterhouse cases, they said no, economic regulations must be, state economic regulations must be protected against this Bill of Rights thingy, but they wanted to do Jim Crow, and of course we got Plessy versus Ferguson, so they gutted the 14th Amendment right out of the chute. And it's taken the last century, literally. Free speech wasn't applied against the states by the Supreme Court until the 1920s. Freedom of religion, not until the 1940s. It wasn't until the turn of the 21st century that the right to bear arms in self-defense as an individual right was recognized by the Supreme Court and applied against the states. So it has taken us a century to do it by the back door, the Due Process Clause, not the vehicle intended. It was the Privileges and Immunities Clause that was meant to do that. But the Supreme Court completely from the outset gutted the powerful substance that is the 14th Amendment.
Hey, Mark, thanks, Jim, by the way.
Wow.
You want to pivot now to the article about executive authority?
Well, yeah, we
and
could
throw in a little bit. The people should like the show. We need a like. You got to hit the like button, folks. We
Indeed.
need that.
If you haven't gotten anything from this conversation, which I think is impossible, one thing you can get is that if you want to stop the tribalism and the gang warfare, and you want to stop being in the crossfire between the gangs, you need to start looking at the American Capitalist Party as the alternative, because I'm done with it. I'm pretty sure a majority of the people are done with it too. But it takes courage, folks. Liberty takes courage. I actually wanted to pivot to something. I mean, we could pivot straight to the presidential power thing, but there's a little article here about the memo that went in the intelligence community that demonstrates that Trump is lying, folks. That's
Come on. I don't believe that.
He's never lied before, at least not in my memory. But it's, when he claimed that Tren de Aragua was an arm, sort of a military wing of the Venezuelan government, and was colluding with them as a sort of irregular forces to be sent against the United States so that he could use the Alien Enemies Act to start deporting these people without due process. It turns out that the intelligence community was not so sure that was happening. In fact, they were saying, there's actually sort of a weird relationship going on between the gang and the Venezuelan government. Like lots of, South American governments are corrupt, and some officials are taking bribes and some aren't, and they're killing Tren de Aragua, and they're afraid of Tren de Aragua, and they're not really sending him over here as an organized group of vandals to take over America. It's really not happening. I'm wondering if the president's going to backtrack. Now, James, what do you think of this? I mean, President Trump lying? This is just what?
Yeah. Yes, he was told by the CIA and the FBI that this analysis that Tren de Aragua was somehow an arm of the Venezuelan government, which is using them in some kind of warfare against the United States, is just factually false. Tren de Aragua is not on good terms with the Venezuelan government. But you see, it made it convenient for his argument, because under the Enemy Aliens Act, you need some kind of hostility that America's caught up in at the very least. And and look how easy it would make his argument. If Tren de Aragua is an arm of the Venezuelan government, and if they're doing violence against Americans, then you see, I can prove that America is getting, through Tren de Aragua, easily prove that it's being caught up within the meaning of the Alien Enemies Act. So rather than making the more difficult argument that he would have to make under the Alien Enemies Act, well, okay, any foreign hostility, which is, you see, he's going out, we'd have to go out on a pretty thin theoretical branch, which so far the Supreme Court hasn't agreed with. Every time the Enemy Alien Act has been used since the War of 1812 through the World Wars, it was a case where America was at war. And that, at least in practice. Now, I think you could have a theoretical argument that would say, well, some foreign entity engaged in hostilities that we're caught up with, but that would be a much thinner argument, and he doesn't want to make a thin argument, so he outright lies. He ignores what the CIA and the FBI are telling him. Tren de Aragua is not an arm of the Venezuelan government. Get over it. So your easy, layup kind of argument about the application of the Enemy Aliens Act is just factually wrong. It's predicated on BS. And so, yeah, he's lying. He's lying so it could make his argument, his legal argument in court, a lot easier. It's that simple.
That's scary because the president is essentially unilaterally going against what the intelligence community is saying is real intelligence, and asserting his own will over the American people and people who are here in general. Now, that speaks to this next article about how we have to deal with presidential power. Now, that's an incredible amount of power to exercise over the American people, and I suspect that is not constitutionally granted power. Can you talk a little bit about what the executive is granted by the Constitution of the United States?
Well, this is actually a good article, and I know you guys have technical, post the link problems, but this is one where I would beg you to post the link somehow, find the technical prowess to post the link to this American Enterprise Institute published article, because it's a good one.
I'll do it.
This guy, the author, actually goes through the history of how we got here. It was the increased power given to the federal government, given to executive agencies, starting with the New Deal, on through the 50s and 60s, where they kept adding power to the executive branch, where Congress kept giving power, discretionary power to the executive branch, that created this thing, this unwieldy, powerful, Caesar-like executive that we now currently have. The Supreme Court went along with it, mind you, and this guy correctly delineates the history of how we got to Mr. Trump. And more recently, what we've seen is an increasing use of executive orders by presidents. Obama initially, most people listening probably lived through it and remember, Obama first said, well, I need Congress to do something on immigration. And then he's turned around and said, no, I can do it with a pen and a phone and my executive orders. And he proceeded then to do something that he even said was outside of his constitutional power through executive order. But did the left let him get away with it? Absolutely, the left let him get away with it. Joe Biden, he ignored Supreme Court decisions. Joe Biden invoked certain executive authority powers. And so it is true that Donald Trump is doing this in a far more aggressive and fast, certainly at a blindingly fast pace, using all of this new executive order power that has been seized recently unilaterally by presidents like Obama and his first term and Biden. We've reached this point, ladies and gentlemen, step by step over the last century in giving the executive department more and more and more power. It is these agencies, as I've said many times, are themselves a violation of the Constitution simply on the separation of powers issue. They make the rule, they interpret the rule, they enforce the rule. That is precisely what the framers wanted to avoid. That is precisely what Madison argued against in the Federalist. That is precisely why he said we have Article 1 about the Congress, Article 2 about the executive, Article 3 about the judiciary, and the three should be kept separate. Now, all these executive agencies, whether it's the FCC or you name it, the EPA, all those alphabet agencies, in my view, are utter corruptions, utterly unconstitutional on the face of it. If we had that understanding from the outset, see, recently the Supreme Court has they've been mixed on this point. They've been pulling back in some ways on presidential powers, saying Congress has got to handle the big issues. But in other ways, they've been saying, hey, wait a minute. Where does the Constitution say that the president can't fire people from independent agencies? And so to some degree, the Supreme Court has given the green light for the president to go in and now completely personally micromanage all of these so-called independent agencies, maybe not all of them, but an increasing number of them, so that what the president has become now, by operation of law over the slow passing of decades now, more than my lifetime, mind you, more like the last 90 years, we've given so much power to the executive branch and so much unconstitutional unified power that violates the separation of powers that we are in the process of watching a Caesar bloom before our eyes, the very thing the founding fathers were trying to avoid. They were trying to protect our republic from ever disintegrating into the empire that Rome, ancient Rome, experienced, going from republic to Caesars, who became absolute rulers and in short order appointing horses as senators. And so they wanted to avoid that experience. And unfortunately, because the Supreme Court has really ignored the document those framers gave us and their original intention and meaning behind it, we are in the process of watching the emergence of American Caesars.
Now, should those jobs be protected by statute, though? So apparently, some of those jobs are protected. Is that legal?
Well, the civil service reform, back in the old days of the spoils system, Andy Jackson, way back in the 1830s, he gets elected. He fires everyone, secretaries, janitors, everyone in the building goes out. And if you're not a supporter and a donor of Andrew Jackson, you don't work for the federal government, even in the smallest way. So they have civil service jobs, which are non-policy making jobs. And that was the initial distinction. If you're a policy making executive, you can be appointed and fired by the government, only if they have quasi-judicial powers. Now get that. They're already slopping when it comes to what a judge is in the third independent branch of government. So if they have quasi-judicial powers, then that can limit what the president can do in terms of removing them from office. Their lifetime tenure, like Article 3 says federal judges ought to be, lifetime tenure. But now by the 1950s, we reached a point where they were creating all kinds of things which really didn't have any even quasi-judicial powers, saying they're independent and the president can't remove them. Now, if it is the fact that the Constitution gives the president the power to manage the executive branch, that means he can fire policy-making members of the administration. And I think there's a good argument for that. Who the hell governs this bureaucracy, this independent bureaucracy that is managed by no one, accountable to no one? The Supreme Court has said, wait, that can't be. So the president really probably should be able to fire these people. Well, what does that then do? It turns our president into an absolute ruler of the executive branch. And as I say, that's the direction we're now heading into. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if a lot of these cases that come before the Supreme Court will agree with Trump. Oh, yeah. We can't have an unaccountable bureaucracy running the show. Now, obviously, Congress should step up to the plate and say, no, this is the limits of that agency's power, at the very least, if not eliminate that agency altogether, which, again, Michael, if we look at Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, 90% of them simply cannot be justified on the very specific list of powers, which I think must be read very narrowly and specifically, granted to Congress and the federal government. The president's power outside of the military and foreign affairs is an emanation of what Congress does. He has the power to enforce, take care that the laws be faithfully executed. He has the executive power. So that power is in effect dependent on the acts that Congress passes. If Congress cannot pass that act, as the Bill of Rights limits the power of Congress, then that is an unconstitutional thing the president's doing, I would ask you to bear in mind. But we've given too much power to the federal government, and that is, requires some kind of supervision, and the Supreme Court says the president can remove him, then we're SOL, folks. We're just screwed, because now the president is the complete lord master of this entire unwieldy, all-powerful federal bureaucracy. Is that any better?
Indeed, no. So we are in the swamp. We are up to our necks in the swamp. Jim, I want to before we get to Michael's capitalist thought of the day.
No. I got a proposition. Yes.
Okay. Before we get to somebody's capitalist thought of the day, before we get to this proposition, I want to leave people with a positive note, because at this point, the swamp is rising. It's up to their nostrils. They're barely breathing. What's the solution to this? I mean, literal Gordian knot of government hell that the statists have created for us. How do we get out of it?
We got to put in power. We got to elect people from a new party.
Yeah. We need both ideological leadership that can point out the sort of things that I'm pointing out and the corruption of it, so that we can get justices of the Supreme Court who start understanding the Constitution as it was originally written and intended. But that requires cultural change. Most people in this country do not understand our position properly. But then we also need activists like you guys, a party that can implement this, run candidates, challenge the existing candidates on the crap they're saying, point out how unconstitutional and un-American what they all both are advocating. I mean, you got the right today, throwing in the towel on capitalism altogether with Trump's tariffs and antitrust laws and all that other crap. You've got the left advocating for censorship nakedly advocating for. So when the left is advocating for censorship and the right is advocating for socialism, what's left of America? Nothing. And we need to have activists like you, intellectuals to defend them. We need cultural change. We need political change. That's the only way we're going to fix this.
Amen. Now, Michael, what's your proposition? Because we have very little time left.
Well, Jim is suggesting that I post the AEI article to the station. So I'm just saying I will do that, but I'm a traitor. And what I would like in return is for Jim to give us the capitalist thought for the day.
Ooh. Okay. I agree with that. I second that. You're outvoted. We are living in a spoil system democracy right now. We're not practicing that here. The rule of two beats one, my friend.
Well, that's what democracy is, right? Even a super majority of 9 people, you got a room full of 10 people. If 9 say, let's beat up the 10th, does that make it okay because you got a super majority? Anyway, my capitalist thought of the day would be that liberty is a unified concept. Rights are a unity, a logical unity. You cannot have civil liberties, my leftist friends, without economic liberties. For what's left of those who respect the free market and capitalism, you cannot have economic liberties without civil liberties. The two imply one another. Freedom is freedom. It is the freedom from being coerced by others, including and especially the government. So civil liberties and economic liberties are one. Property rights and civil rights are one. The one cannot exist without the other.
Well, that was great.
I'm amen to that, because I remember talking to somebody from the Human Rights Council. They were trying to pitch me to be a member, and I started arguing with them on the phone, and she was a 20-something-year-old, and she said, well, human rights and property rights are not the same thing. And that's a scary thought. That was a millennial speaking, but I think you just corrected her, and if she is watching and listening, I hope she feels duly ashamed and ready to make the transition over to capital.
He also set a rather high bar for us from now on. Maybe it was a mistake having him do it.
I like it. I don't think I'll be able to measure up to it, but I'm going to try.
You guys do a great job. I do not miss a single show.
Well,
awesome.
I want you guys to know that I try and catch as much of it as I can every single day. And I think others ought to have the same policy.
Well, yes. Folks, hit the like button and remember to pass this show on to your friends so that we can get this algorithm going and we can get the word out to more people. Yeah, James, you do set the bar very high. I don't anticipate I'll be able to meet up to it, but I'm going to reach as high as I can to get there, and that's all your fault. We really appreciate you being on the show, and we hope you become a regular guest to clear up these constitutional issues and to straighten out everybody's mind with respect to what the nature of government, what rights are. The idea that liberty is a unified whole is such a great concept. It's that rights are a unified whole. Just that idea in itself should become a maxim to people out there, and that could be a great moral guide for people. So, folks, tune in tomorrow, same bat time, same bat place, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, make sure you watch listen to The Rational Egoists. He's got a great show coming up. All his shows are great. He's got great debates with folks. And this next one about Marxism, a Marxist takedown, is exactly what we need today. James Valliant, you should follow him on social media and watch him on any podcast he's on. He brings a wealth of knowledge and wisdom And that's a rare combination in our world today, knowledge and wisdom, but you have both, my friend. And we're going to try to get him on here as regularly as possible and abuse his time because it makes us better and smarter people, and I think it makes you guys better. Also, I want you to take one note before we split. Whenever you see communists, pictures of commie guys, these American Communist Party guys, look how unhappy they are. But look at the smiling faces beaming around you today. Capitalists are happy, and they understand happiness and the attainment of happiness and the achievement of their goals is a good thing. It's not a terrible thing, folks. It's a good thing. Pursue your happiness. Pursue your rational self-interest. It's awesome. And until that time, folks, always remember to check your premises. We'll see you tomorrow.